Hi, my name is Bethany, and today I want to talk to you about the Asperger's versus autism debate and why people get so heated over these terms. So much of this is mostly an explanation for those of you who are confused about the kind of hostility that you might see regarding if someone uses the word Asperger's or that term, and where that maybe is coming from. There will be a few sources for this video, but mostly is going to be kind of an explanation of that whole conversation. So first of all, Asperger syndrome was named as such because it was reportedly a man named Hans Asperger who had defined it, studied it, and made major contributions toward it, etc. So they named it Asperger syndrome because he had put out kind of a definition of what this syndrome was. Thus, it was named after him. Now, our understanding of autism, or specifically Asperger's, as it were, was really broadened once this work was translated into English. So we began to understand that you didn't have to have maybe a severe or extreme, obvious autism to be on the spectrum, because at the time, of course, it was like autism, PDD-NOS, which is pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified, and then Asperger syndrome and a few other things that were like all up in this kind of range that were connected, but at the time they hadn't put them all into one diagnosis like it is now. So in the DSM-4, Asperger's syndrome was a diagnosis. The ICD-10 also has Asperger's syndrome as a diagnosis. Now we are on the DSM-5 now here in America. However, many countries use the ICD-10. So currently, right now, people are being diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome because that is what is technically correct according to their diagnostic manual. However, the ICD-11 is coming out and will be used officially as of January of 2022. The DSM-5 removed Asperger syndrome as well as things like PDD-NOS and just combined them together under autism spectrum disorder. And reportedly, the ICD-11 that is coming out and going to be used at the beginning of next year will also follow suit to do that. Thus, the diagnosis of Asperger syndrome will likely officially end as of January 2022 around the world. So why do people get so upset when this term is used, especially when there are people currently being diagnosed with it? Many people have been diagnosed with Asperger syndrome, especially those who have been diagnosed older in the past, or those who just had maybe gotten diagnosis as they were older, beginning to see their limits and being able to fall in a very specific category under Asperger's because it is much more defined than the current autism spectrum disorder. The term Aspie has been popular amongst some people who find it as a nice nickname. They find it defines them better. Asperger's being, again, more defined specifically, and so some people feel like since they fall better under that, it makes more sense to go by Asperger's rather than autism. On the other hand, some people argue that those who use Asperger's are some kind of supremacists, saying that they want to use the term only because it divides them from those who might have learning difficulties or disabilities and who might have lower IQ scores, as well as things like apraxia or other comorbid conditions that might put them at what people would call severe or even classic autism. Again, these are terms that have been used over time to try to describe the variations in how autism might look in different people. Thus, they think that using Asperger's is a way to keep from being lumped in with people that they think are lesser than them. Other people are taking it as far as saying that if you insist on using the word Asperger's or that term, that you are akin to Nazis. Now, this has gained traction recently because of some newer information regarding the individual Hans Asperger. There is newer evidence that suggests that Asperger colluded with the Nazi eugenics program with the children that he was working with. So in the past, it had been thought that Asperger actually had managed to save many autistic children by emphasizing their intelligence to help avoid them being murdered in the name of eugenics. However, now it's been found through newer access to old records that were thought to have been destroyed or not exist, basically, that it seemed like he was more about prioritizing keeping those he found more intelligent alive and sending others to a clinic that was well known to be a euthanizing site for children that were considered less than and were not fit according to the Nazi ideal. The researchers claim that his language and his notes changed over time from being maybe more hesitant about like making diagnoses or stuff like that to pretty much sounding like the perfect Nazi idealist, and the way that people fit into certain categories of human, it was pretty gross. And apparently a lot of times would talk very negatively about the children compared to his coworkers who would write more positive things about those children. So again, just quite a disappointing thing to learn, especially when it had been thought that Asperger was almost a hero for saving so many of these children, supposedly, by emphasizing their intelligence to avoid them being murdered because of eugenics. Now, this revelation obviously has caused a lot of conflict. Many people don't want the term Asperger's to be used for that exact reason. Others say that trying to erase history won't erase what he did and isn't going to be productive in general. They also note that just because someone has something named after them, like their discovery, doesn't mean that that person was a good person. Either way, though, both diagnostic manuals by 2022 will not have that term, so it's kind of a moot point in some respects because people won't be diagnosed with it anymore as of next year, technically. So I think this particular issue really exemplifies the clash of very strong values, thoughts, and opinions that autistic people can hold. There's often an emphasis on accuracy and justice within autistic people. Some people feel that Asperger's, because it was their official diagnosis and it describes them better, that it's accurate to use that. Some people have an affinity for the term Aspie because they've developed a community around it. And a lot of us really don't like the idea of being forced to comply to things. So the idea that someone should abandon a diagnosis that they were given or that more accurately describes their place on the spectrum that they find themselves at just to appease random people online or else, that doesn't really sit well with a lot of people. Other people say that since Asperger's is no longer a diagnosis in the DSM-5, that it's inaccurate and should be called autism spectrum disorder for all of the people who were diagnosed with Asperger's. And technically, when it comes to psychologists, psychiatry, etc., their diagnosis would be later updated should they go back to someone from Asperger's to ASD automatically without a reevaluation, from my understanding. And then of course some people feel Asperger's was a really bad person, obviously, so no one should use that term ever again, including things like Aspie. Those who are newer to understanding how Asperger's is actually a part of the autism spectrum, who are newer to even accepting themselves regarding Asperger's, because Asperger's just seemed less scary than autism. And I think especially with older people who have trouble with accepting that something could be wrong with them or that they have limits, etc., that can be really difficult, especially for older generations who didn't talk about this type of stuff very much. It can be harder to just adjust to this abandonment of Asperger's by demand of other people. Demanding people who are by nature, autistic people, resistant to change at your whim isn't really fair. Just assuming that someone's some type of supremacist or like a Nazi sympathizer or something just because they're using a diagnostic term that is outdated, I don't think that's fair at all. That is a really big leap and just, in my opinion, is unfair and divisive. The reality is that a lot of people have trouble coming to terms with their autism diagnosis as it is. And for some people, it was hard enough to come to terms with Asperger's, let alone now understanding that, yes, that is autism. That's hard for some people, and that's okay. It is okay for someone to feel how they feel about their own diagnoses. And I know a lot of people don't like that because they want other people to see things how they see things, but that's not really fair, right? So I think it's important to consider those people who do have a difficulty accepting that part of themselves or accepting that this is a thing. Either way though, the term is probably going to fade away anyway, because again, the diagnostic manuals by 2022 will both have gotten rid of it to absorb it into autism spectrum disorder. So I just don't feel like it's appropriate to demand all this stuff from people and act like you're doing some big thing by that, in my personal opinion, because it's going to fade away anyway. And just trying to be like, pretending you're a better person for telling someone that they're not allowed to use a word, I just don't see how that's helpful. I say let people use Asperger's or Aspie if they want to. Let people move from saying that to saying autism. Just let people be. I don't think that it's the end of the world. I think it's probably good though for people to understand what happened truthfully with Asperger, to be aware of the type of atrocities that people are capable of, and that is a part of autism history and a part of history in general, that these things happened and changing things doesn't make them go away. People have done bad things and we have to face that, and it's not comfortable. Regardless, I use autism/autistic or whatever else because that's our current understanding. For me, that's what is accurate. So that's probably what you'll see here mostly. Either way, I hope that this helped you understand why there's so much contention around the terms and everyone's feelings about things, and maybe why you might be met with hostility should you use the term Asperger's or Aspie, etc. I'm not saying that it's right for you to be met with hostility, I'm just telling you why that might be. Anyway, if you found this interesting, informative, useful, whatever else, you can go ahead and hit that like button. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Did you know this about Asperger? If you enjoy autism related videos from me, you can go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I do try to upload videos every Thursday at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time, except for the last Thursday of the month where I try to go live with you all.
Thank you to everyone who supports me here on YouTube as YouTube channel members, those who give through Ko-fi, my patrons on Patreon, and a special thank you to my Spaz tier patron, Philip Noah.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you're having a wonderful week, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!